welcome everybody. Today we're going to go over the next steps in after we've already sanded down our cup. So the priming and painting of the cup, and then applying the first coat of epoxy and laying down the first layer of glitter. And then that'll be set up for applying a next coat of epoxy. So once you get your glitter on, it will allow you to apply a base layer. And what will end up, once you get everything applied, your end result will end up with a cup similar to this right here with your design. And as I stated before, I still have not finished this one off. It's been a little busy between work and family, so I will do a video on what it's like to even finish this one off another coat. But the whole reason behind applying paint is just another layer to add either base color, because this paint that I applied is actually this color paint along with the glitter that I applied, as you can see, very close to the glitter. Some glitter has no color to it whatsoever, so you can see the paint right through the glitter. Some glitter you don't see through at all. So you have to be very careful with your base color that you choose. This is the cup we prepped in the last video. Still the base one. You can put the epoxy and glitter directly to it. It's very likely that you'll see the cup color directly to it, right through any glitter that you apply, depending on how thick you do it. So if you want that stainless steel color direct showing through your glitter and epoxy, go ahead and apply it through it. This is a very pretty color, so go ahead and use it. Don't be afraid to do it. I have not done it up myself, but I have seen some people that do it. It all depends on the type of glitter. And just so you're aware, the easiest glitter to use when you're first starting out is the ultra fine glitter. The hardest one is the really thick glitter. I've done a couple cups with that. It is very difficult to use, makes a very big mess, and I will be doing a couple videos with that. So once you get your base coating on top of the glitter, this is what it ends up doing. This is the base coating of this color for this color. And what's neat about this glitter is this is nothing more than glow-in-the-dark glitter with a little speckling of onyx black glitter, both ultra fine glitter. So as you can see, it's just a darker shade of purple for this. These are going to be matching set cups, just one a little darker than the other. But for this cup that I'm making, I'm going to do a red base. Now for any of these paints, I prefer a satin finish. These ones were a gloss finish. I didn't realize it. I didn't pay attention when I bought these, but you do need to make sure that you get the paint and primer in one, because you do have to have a primer base after you finish these to make sure that nothing does, if you do get any moisture under the epoxy coating. If you do a proper coating, you will not get any moisture in there, but say just a tiny bubble forms, you do run the risk of getting any type of moisture under there, which further down the road can create a problem. The reason why I choose satin is it just allows a better base for the epoxy to adhere to. When I'm using black or white, I use just a standard primer for it. You don't have to use the Rust-Oleum. It's just the brand that I choose. I've used all kinds of different brands. You can use whatever brand works best for you. So with that being said, we're going to go move over to my other workstation and start moving with the. All right, so we're moved over to our other workstation. Here you've got my turner. Now we're going to get the cup moved over here. And as you can see, this is the setup I've described. And it just spins on. Get that turning. And the reason why I do this is to, as I said in my previous video, is to wipe any excess grease from hands or just any moisture off so that the paint sticks properly. And you just wipe it, and this is why I use the spinner. That way I don't have to spin it around by hand. You don't have to do it this way, but this is just what I felt works best for me. And what I do is I pay attention to the words on the PVC pipe to know how many spins it's made. And because my turner turns at 2 revolutions per minute, I just keep wiping it, make sure that it gets a good wiping down. And I just use the 91% alcohol. And there shouldn't be anything coming off. See, my rag is nice and clean already. Like I said, it's just getting the residual off of here. And see, it's already come around once. And just don't forget to get the bottom. And get along this top lip here as well. Okay, that'll do it for getting the alcohol, getting any residual off. From here, shut the turner off. As long as you don't handle the cup by hand at this point, unscrew it by hand. Everything's nice and clean. I do a quick inspection. The alcohol's already dried off and it's ready to be painted. All right, welcome back everybody. Got the cup all spray painted, back on the roller, and got to mix up some epoxy, and got my scale here. I always do it measured out, vice the pre-measured stuff. So I use a little mixer. So it's got these little silicone cups. I got my mixer from Hobby Lobby, just like my turners I got from Hobby Lobby. So once I put it on the scale, zero it out. So there we're zeroed. I've got my scale set to fluid ounces. It really doesn't matter as long as you get equal parts. I use 1-to-1 mixture for epoxy. The trick that I've always learned to use is adding the hardener first, your B, as it comes out. It just seems to mix a lot better. So, and it doesn't take a whole lot So I'm going for the 0.4 to 0.5 range. When you're doing your mixture for your, once you have glitter on, it can take a little bit more depending on how much glitter you end up having on. So you might want to go a little bit heavier on there, the 0.5 to 0.6 range. This epoxy is about 2 years old, so the older it gets, the hardener can start yellowing. And then your A portion can start, or your hardener can start to yellow out, but it's such a thin layer you don't even notice. So as you see, it's not very much epoxy in there. My little mixer there, you can see the little mixing just sits there and mixes it, and you just let it do its thing. It takes about 5 minutes all total for that to run. And what I do, the little trick that I've learned, is I just grab the top once it gets to a point, just to get the sides, and get a real good scrape at the bottom. You just hold it tight. If you're doing a heavier mixture, like if you're trying to do 2 cups at once, it can get closer to the top. So just be mindful of that. All right, now we're back with got our epoxy mixture out of the mixer. So normally I'd give it a little burst from the heat gun at this point, but on the very base layer, I'm not too worried about bubbles. Plus I'll give it a little burst from the heat gun once I get it on there and get it smoothed out. But wipe off as much as I can. And I just set that down. This right here, where the snowmans are at, this is just a silicone mat. The reason why I have this down is for any drippings from the epoxy. Once it's any drippings, I'll be able to just pick them off and they'll peel right off, just like these silicone cups. Any leftover or residual in the cup, once it dries, it just peels right out. So just start, pour a little bit on, and the whole purpose of the rubber gloves is just use my fingers to smear it over. For me, this is what I found to be the best method. And I start from the middle and push it up for the upper portion. And this is why I like it moving nice and slow. All the spinners, turners that I found on Amazon move almost twice as fast as the one that I bought from Hobby Lobby. So it's important to pay attention to the RPMs, the revolutions per minute. So all those bubbles, you'll get a chance to, you blow them off with a little heat gun, if you have one. Some people use a little flame gun. I found that using that is just a little too hot. I do some bigger projects, so I've got a multi-temperature one. And for this layer, you really don't want to get thick at all. So you want to keep it nice and thin. So I keep going from the middle, and depending on which hand you're using, so I'm using my right hand, so I go up and to the right. So I keep that flowing, constantly flowing. And if I end up finding that I have a really thick spot, which at times I've found that, the way I'll fix that is that I'll just start at the top and I'll just go very little pressure and try to keep it as even as possible. Do a complete circle. And just keep working my way down. It does not take any pressure at all to do this, because the key is to make sure that it's even. Because what will happen is that when you apply glitter, if you're wanting glitter, you don't have to actually use glitter to do this. The glitter just helps to make it prettier. So you just keep that working all the way down if you end up with a really thick spot. And the reason why I work my way back for the thick spots is to pull the extra epoxy back. And as you can see, I've got ridges that formed every time I move back. But as the epoxy begins to chemically bond, it'll heat up and that'll settle out. But as I get it, once I get it all to evenly spread around the cup, I'll come back and do another round, but I do the bottom first, the bottom half first, before I do it again. But right now I'm just trying to pull it, make sure that it's even all the way around. And I use all my light sources to look at the reflection in the epoxy. And as I'm looking at it, I can see all the bubbles in it using those light sources. And you can feel as you're touching it, you can feel any thick spots. And right now I don't feel any on this one. It actually went on really smooth. So now I made it about halfway down. So now I want to do the bottom half. And it's the same thing. You start in the center, you pour little bits out. You want to get it worked down. And it's okay to miss gaps because you'll go back through as it comes back around and fill those in. You just want to be careful of how fast you're pouring out of your cup. And whether you're using reusable ones or throwaway cups, the process is still the same. I like reusable ones. That's just me. Again, like I've said before, it's all about you experimenting and figuring out what works best for you. There are multiple ways of doing every little thing. And then you want to make sure once you get a good coating on all the surfaces, that gap that was down here for this style of cup, this crease right here, you want to specifically focus on it to make sure it fills in nicely. You don't need to get extra epoxy for it. You just need to make sure that it fills in there. And as I'm looking at it, I don't see any spot. And then to do the bottom, I don't pour any on there. I just dip my finger into the epoxy in the cup, wipe a little bit off, and I do a little bit on there. Because you don't need a whole lot on there, but it will start to run off your fingers the more you have on there. And then you wipe off any excess as it starts to drip down. And I would, just like working up here, you start from the middle, work up, middle, work down. On the bottom, you start at the middle, and I start at the middle and work my way down to make sure you get an even coating across the entire bottom. And I pull it all the way to the edge and maybe even round a little bit. And when it starts to cure on the bottom, you may see an uneven setting. But you can fix that once you sand it, especially once you put a coating over the glitter, because this is just a base for the glitter. So you, at this point, you will end up putting glitter on if you put glitter into this. So we've got a base, you've got epoxy over the whole thing. So I want to still make sure that it's smooth over the whole thing. So I make sure, grab the whole piece again, and I'm rounding at the very top, rounding over just a little bit to make sure that that lip gets it. And one of the very final pieces before the cup is finished, once you've applied your decal, you put a final coating on, that's when you go back and you either sand or scrape away that very lip so that a lid seals on there correctly. You scrape all that excess away. But you want to make sure that it seals properly to the cup. But you give it one last sort all the way through. And I'm actually looking at my PVC here, looking at the words or any type of the markings on it, seeing how far I've come around. And once I've done one or two rounds, I do down to the bottom. And the same thing, I wrap around the bottom. Some people will do the whole thing all at once. The only problem I've had with that is sometimes you'll pull away from the lips, whether it be the bottom lip or the top lip. Now, I don't worry about the middle being any buildup in the middle, because the epoxy itself will smooth itself out as it starts to chemically combine and set up. Now again, as I'm looking at it, I can see a whole bunch of bubbles in there. And the epoxy now, and see how I've still got quite a bit of epoxy in there. So that was 0.8 fluid ounces per the scale. And I've still got probably half of what I mixed up. But I've got a nice good base coat on there, ready to put glitter on there. That's more than enough epoxy for what needs to be done. But at this point, I see a lot more bubbles than what I like to see in there. And you're going to get that even if I popped all the bubbles out before I started applying, because you're creating bubbles as you're smoothing it out. So I've got one of these huge heat guns just because of doing it. So turn it on, and I give it a blast the whole way. You don't want to focus on the entire area too much, on one area too much, because it'll overheat and start setting it too fast, because it still needs to stay um, liquid form to apply the glitter, but you want to get the majority of the bubbles out. So here we go. We're going to get the bubbles out. All right. So now the epoxy's on. It's still wet. The heat gun takes a couple minutes to cool off, makes it quieter in here to do more things. But now you also want to give it a couple minutes for the epoxy to settle a little bit, ready to apply glitter. It's literally only been about 3 minutes since I shut off the camera before. The glitter that I'm going to be using today, I'm actually going to be using 3 different colors. I've got some blue, red, and white, and I'm choosing this in honor of Veterans Day coming up. So I'm going to start off with blue, try doing a interesting pattern. I set a paper plate down in here, so catch as much glitter as we can to put back into the container. So, and you want to go heavy because it does soak in. So we'll see what kind of pattern we can get going here. So on each turn, the glitter falls off, falls down into the plate. And then I got to wait again because I wasn't quick enough to start again. So here it comes back around to the bottom, because it will soak in to that epoxy. And the base layer of the glitter will actually harden up, whereas some will remain loose. And I actually raised the plate up too high and got it into the epoxy. And that can happen from time to time. Done quite a few of these, and it happens. I see a streak going into the epoxy. But that will straighten itself out the way the epoxy works. It just happens. So I usually make quite a few passes because as it soaks in, the glitter will start to lose its effect and will almost look somewhat flat inside the epoxy. And then all I do with this, and you can do this with paper plates, you can do this with a piece of paper, curl it up, because everything that falls off obviously is not sticking to the cup. And you can see there's still some glitter still on the plate, so I don't want to reuse that same plate when I go to use another color. But what I always try to do is remember to put the cap back on these, because I've had one instance where I knocked the glitter off of my working table. So I'm gonna do some white next. You'll notice that this is showing the background, the red right behind it. And this is what I was warning you about. So this will definitely have a lot more red than white or blue. So the actual color of this glitter is crystal diamond. So I'm going to keep pouring on. And by the time it's all said and done, it really doesn't use a whole lot of glitter. Especially if you get your layer of epoxy nice and thin. But you just keep working until you've got what appears to be the layer of the thickness of glitter that you want on there. And that one is coming out fairly nicely. So now put the cap back on that one. We'll do our final color, which the actual color on this is listed as ruby red. Which, for those of you who don't know, my favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz. So some ruby red slippers. So now our section is starting to come into view here. So if you're fully soaked in on all your other colors, you would actually be able to apply this to every other color, and it would only soak in where there was showing epoxy. Now, would it grab hold of the other colors? Absolutely. But once it all sets up, it should just be able to brush right off. But you just want to keep applying till you get the thickness of glitter that you want, the look that you want. And if you don't like the look of the other colors, you can always go back, grab them, apply another coating of them, of those colors as well. And then here's a fun piece. Haven't done it yet with any color, so I guess we'll go ahead and do it in red. Doing the very bottom. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I find that it adds a little bit of strength to it. So what I do for the bottom is I lift it up just a little bit. Let's get this back into view here for you. Lift it up just a little bit. And add just a little bit of a coating. Doesn't take much. And now we're out of view again. I'm sorry about that. Here, let me see if I can adjust the camera just a little bit more for you. There we go. And all I'm doing is lifting the whole assembly up so it keeps rotating. And I'm dumping just a little bit on. So this way, when you go to add the next layer of epoxy, even though you're not really going to see it, it does add a bit of grip to the bottom instead of it being perfectly smooth. So, and there we have it. And we take what's left of our glitter that has fallen off. Place the lid back on. So there's what it fully looks like as she's rotating. All right, so took you through the steps of applying the first coat of paint, primer, and epoxy and some glitter. And now the cup now has to set up for a minimum of 4 hours before I'll set it on my actual drying stand. It screws right off of my turner and onto my drying stand. And from there, I can put another cup on, or I can use my second turner to do another piece. Once the glitter will harden, some pieces of glitter will flake back off, but other than that, it will be solid as a rock after about 8 to 12 hours, depending on the amount of heat and humidity. It does take about 24 to 48 hours to fully cure, and then you could run it through the dishwasher at that point if you really wanted to. But to really seal it in, you need to put another layer of epoxy onto it. And what will end up looking like at that point, is this is a cup that's had a layer of epoxy onto glitter. Nothing else has been done to it except for a layer of epoxy on top of the glitter. It is really rough, and this is ready to be sanded down and apply decals to make it personalized. This is actually going to be for my sister. What ended up happening with the bottom here is this didn't get quite so much um, epoxy on the bottom, so again it ended up getting really uneven. But this is not a big issue for the bottom. When I sand it down, I'll sand it down nice and even, and put a little bit thicker of a coat on the bottom. But again, it's not that big of a deal. Um, some people like to do thicker on the edges. I like to keep it thinner because it gives a little bit of a grip on the edges, keeps cups from sliding. I've spent enough time underway that I like cups from not sliding when you set them down on tables. But again, that's just me. Figure out what works best for you. Again, like I've said before in my last video, learn what works best for you, how you want to do it. Keep learning and have fun with it. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.